Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents All Waiting is Long by Barbara J. Taylor, narrated by Tavia Gilbert. Echoes of Mercy, Whispers of Love. Fanny J. Crosby. Part 1. All are agreed. It is important that the boy be given some sex instruction. No such agreement exists concerning sex knowledge for the girl. Some say that such instruction is unnecessary because the sex instinct awakens in girls comparatively late, and it is time enough for them to learn about such matters after they are married. Woman, Her Sex and Love Life. William J. Robinson, M.D., 1929. When Izzy passed on, it seemed fitting to christen ourselves the Isabel Lumley Bible class. After all, she was the one who came up with the idea for our Wednesday women's scripture meetings. At least that's how she told it. Those of us who were there from the beginning remember different, but no sense beating that drum again. Let the dead rest is what we say. Besides, Izzy left enough money to Providence Christian Church to erase any hard feelings and repair the crumbling steeple. A Bible verse or two and a potluck lunch make for an edifying afternoon. And a much-needed one, given the moral decline we see today. Gambling, joy-riding, bootlegging, not to mention the goings-on in the alleys downtown, a regular red-light district, our very own Sodom and Gomorrah right here in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Surely we're glancing the end times. That's why it's so comforting to have a man like Reverend Sheets in the pulpit, an optimist through and through. Somehow he always manages to come back around to Noah's Ark and that rainbow promise. An uplifting sentiment, though it wouldn't hurt to hear a different Bible lesson from time to time. Maybe something from the New Testament. Why, just the other day we were studying that verse in Matthew about pointing out a speck in your brother's eye while ignoring the beam in your own. There's folks in our congregation who could benefit from such wisdom. Hattie Goodfellow, for one, or should we say Hattie Goodfellow Hatton, always looking down her nose at us, but who's the real sinner? Marrying that fellow from her boarding house and traipsing off to Buffalo at her age. Here we thought she ran a respectable place. And now we're told that her nieces, Violet and Lily, are headed north to help her. Can't say why, but something doesn't ring true about that story. If Hattie needs help setting up house, maybe she's too old to be a newlywed. Not that it's any of our affair. Who are we to judge? Just wish she'd asked our opinion before leaping. Now that the deed is done, God bless and good luck. And if the marriage comes to ruin, as we fear it might, we'll welcome Hattie back with open arms. That's the Christian way. Chapter 1. Violet and Lily trudged to the rear of the Good Shepherd Infant Asylum and entered through the kitchen. According to the widow Lankowski, who'd made the arrangements, only benefactors, adoptive couples, physicians, and members of the clergy were allowed to use the front door. The Sisters of the Immaculate Heart of Mary instituted this practice years earlier in order to protect the identities of the expectant mothers they served. "Don't let the door slam," a fire plug of a girl yelled from across the room. Lily pressed her hand against the oak panel and eased it shut. A stripe of fresh snow spanned the length of the threshold. "The latch catches." The girl stood at the sink with her back to the newcomers. A tangle of red curls settled just beyond her shoulders. "Don't want to lock out all of our gentlemen callers," she laughed, throaty and low. "Names?" "Violet Morgan, and my sister Lily." Violet stepped onto a rag rug and stomped her boots. Lily remained on the bare linoleum. Water puddled at her feet. "The Protestants are here," the girl called out as she washed the last plate in the dishpan and dried her hands. "No rest for the wicked." She turned and smiled at the pair, exposing her swollen belly. "So which one of you is in the puddin' club?" she asked. Her eyes darted across their stomachs. "That will be all, Muriel." A tall woman robed in dark blue serge glided into the room. "If you hurry, you'll just make confession." Her brittle voice cracked on the word confession, as if failing to hit a note out of range. Embarrassment ignited the girl's cheeks as she started for the doorway. "You can't tell, is all." "Our mother carried small," Violet explained. "Confession," the nun repeated, patting a gold crucifix that hung from a chain around her neck. Muriel winked at Lily from behind the nun, crossed one swollen ankle behind the other, grabbed the sides of her dress, and bowed. Without looking back, the nun added, "You might want to save that curtsy for His Holiness should he visit us here in Philadelphia." Muriel slinked out of the room. "I'm Mother Mary Joseph." The woman took a step forward, and the rosary beads at her waist rattled in time. "Reverend Mother, you must be the young ladies from Scranton?" "Yes, ma'am." Violet let go of the 2 suitcases she'd carried from the train station and pulled her younger sister Lily onto the rug. Even with 9 years between them, the Morgan girls shared a strong likeness. Fair Welsh complexions, small even teeth, dimpled left cheeks. Yet in spite of their similarities, people often referred to Lily as the pretty one. Her large round eyes were blue instead of brown, her features soft, not angular like Violet's, and Lily's hair, a warm chocolate, not that unforgiving pitch. It was as if an artist had sketched the same face twice, opting for a lighter hand the second time. "It's most unusual for us to house both a charge and her sister." The nun poked her hand out from a fan of sleeve and motioned the visitors forward, past a pallet stacked with brushes, paint cans, and thinner. "But Father Zarnowski from St. Stanislaus in Scranton requested the arrangement." Mother Mary Joseph sat down at the head of a table in the center of the room and nodded for Violet and Lily to each take a chair on either side of her. "And then, when your friend Mrs. Lankowski made her generous donation to the Good Shepherd," the nun waved toward a freshly painted wall, "well, how could we say no?" She pressed her lips into a thin smile and reached for a small brass bell on the table. "Have you had your supper?" "On the train." 25-year-old Violet noted the absence of wrinkles on the woman's pale skin and wondered about her age. Under the dark veil, a starched band of white fabric stretched around her forehead, and another one framed her cheeks and neck. A large bib-like collar circled her chest and shoulders in that same stiff white material. This woman possessed a confidence suggestive of age, but Violet could not see it on her face. "A cup of tea, then," the nun said, ringing the bell, "to take the chill off." "Thank you." Violet kicked Lily's foot under the table. Lily, head bowed, fingers tracing the tablecloth's blue and red roses, seemed not to notice. Muriel appeared in the doorway. "Everyone's at chapel." "Not everyone," Mother Mary Joseph sighed. "Make yourself useful, then, and put on the kettle." The girl scurried halfway across the room before she seemed to remember herself and her ungainly body. She stopped for a moment, caught her breath, and took measured steps toward the sink. "Let's see now." The nun began pulling items from the folds of her garment, a pair of eyeglasses, which she positioned halfway down her nose, a small ledger, leather-bound in black, several pencils newly sharpened, and 2 handkerchiefs embroidered with the letters IHM. She opened the ledger to the day's date, Saturday, February 22nd, 1930, licked the tip of the closest pencil, and pushed a handkerchief toward Lily. "How old are you, child?" 16. Lily's gaze remained fixed on the tablecloth. 1 week from today." "Look at me when I speak to you." Mother Mary Joseph lifted the girl's chin and studied her swollen eyes. "That's better." She offered another flattened smile and made a notation. "It's my understanding that your confinement should be for a period of 3 months." Lily glanced across the table at her sister, then back at the nun. "Yes, ma'am." Her lower lip quivered. "You're absolutely certain?" The Reverend Mother pulled back Lily's coat and studied her belly. 6 months along? "As near as I can figure." Under the table, Violet pressed her right pinky against her leg. When counting off, she always started with the pinky. March, April, May. Her index finger and thumb remained aloft, aimed in Lily's direction. "I've ruined everything." Lily reached for the handkerchief and burst into tears. Air charged from Violet's nostrils. Lily had ruined everything. Violet was a forgiving person. Goodness knows she had to be. But enough was enough. Lily never considered the consequences of her behavior. She only thought of herself. Had she even wondered what her delicate condition would do to their nervous mother? Had she ever weighed the cost of hiding it from their ailing father? And what about the widow Lankowski? How humiliating it had been when Violet's mother dragged the woman into what should have been a family matter. The widow had practically raised Violet, but Violet was embarrassed all the same. And then there was the matter of her promise to marry Stanley, a secret only the widow was privy to. Violet would probably still be at the Good Shepherd Infant Asylum long after Stanley returned home to Scranton, and hand to God that was Lily Morgan's fault. "Don't be cross with me." Lily blew her nose into the handkerchief and refolded it. "Not now." Violet pushed both words through gritted teeth. "Stanley will wait," Lily continued, dabbing her eyes with a dry corner of linen. "You'll see." "Stanley?" Mother Mary Joseph tugged off her glasses and pursed her lips. "Hush." Violet glared at Lily. "Don't drag him into this." "The widow Lankowski's son," Lily explained. "Adopted. More of a son than most." Violet dug her fingernails into her thigh. The nun picked up her glasses, curled the wires around her ears, and started to write. "So this Stanley." She looked up at Lily. "He's responsible for your trouble?" "No," the pair responded in unison. "He's Violet's intended," Lily said, as if she had an intended of her own. Violet slapped her palms on top of the table. "You knew?" she whispered, as if saying the words too loudly would make them true. "Stop yelling at me." Lily looked over at the Reverend Mother. "She's always yelling at me." Violet parceled out her words quietly, evenly. "I'm not yelling." "You're yelling at me in that low voice of yours." When no one came to Lily's defense, she continued, "Mother found out you were planning to run away with him." Violet started up from her chair and leaned toward her sister. "And just how did she find out?" The nun patted Violet's hand, encouraging her to take her seat. Lily gulped and squeezed her eyes shut. When she finally spoke, her words charged forth on a single breath. "I heard you and the widow talking on Christmas Eve." Violet cursed herself for being so careless. "And you couldn't wait to tell Mother." "She made me. She didn't know about it." Violet stamped both feet, rattling the table. "How could she make you?" Lily's eyes popped open wide. "I didn't want you running away with Stanley. I didn't want to be left alone." "Well, you got your wish. We're together now." "It was your idea to come with me." Lily's cheeks flushed. "I certainly don't need a keeper." "You've done a fine job so far." "Oh, and you're so perfect." Lily turned to the nun. "Our parents don't approve of Stanley, him being Catholic and all." She cleared her throat conspiratorially. "Not to mention Polish, but that doesn't seem to matter to her." She tossed her head toward Violet. Silence filled the room as the Reverend Mother considered the matter. When she finally spoke, her words lacked any trace of sentimentality. "Our Lord in heaven commands us to honor thy father and thy mother." The nun pushed the second handkerchief toward Violet. "And experience cautions us against mixed marriages." Experience. The word reverberated in Violet's ear like a sour note at the piano. What experience might a nun have? How could someone married to Jesus understand real love? Violet twisted the hanky as if wringing it out to dry. "I've honored my parents all my life," she finally managed. "You'll not find a more devoted daughter." She shot a look at both Lily and the nun, daring either one to dispute her claim. Lily's lips parted briefly, but without result. "Tea's ready," Muriel said, breaking the silence. She placed the teapot, creamer, sugar bowl, and spoons next to 3 cups and saucers already on the tray, and carried them to the table. A 4th cup sat cooling on the stove behind her. "Don't mind me," she said. "I'm not even here." Mother Mary Joseph emptied the tray and poured the tea. Muriel backed away from the table, hoisted herself onto a stool near the wall, and quietly sipped her drink. "Now, in the matter of the child—" The nun warmed her hands over her cup. "We seek good Christian homes, and try to consider creed and appearance when making a match. For instance, a tow-headed child in a family of Turks would cause a stir." The Reverend Mother fixed her gaze on Lily, but cast her voice in Violet's direction. "We find it best to keep them with their own kind." Though reeling from the nun's comments, Violet couldn't bring herself to argue. Truth be told, from the moment she knew Lily's baby would be adopted out, she pictured the child being raised by a family similar to her own. Welsh, Protestant, fair-skinned. The father a hard-working miner, and the mother a dark-haired beauty. They'd probably be poor like most, but no matter, as long as they raised the child to fear God. But enough of that. Mother Mary Joseph closed her notebook and slipped it into her pocket. "The two of you must be exhausted from your trip." "Yes, ma'am," Lily answered when Violet remained silent. "Muriel, will you show the girls to their beds after they finish their tea?" The nun turned and stared at the girl. "Since you're still so close at hand?" Muriel's cheeks reddened again as she lowered herself from the stool. "Gladly." "Get some rest now," the Reverend Mother said as she rose from the table. 6:30 comes early." "Pardon?" Lily's head snapped up. "Mass begins promptly at 7. Before Lily had a chance to object, the nun added, "And attendance is required. Here at the Good Shepherd, we're all God's children." Chapter 2. "It ain't so bad here." Muriel led the pair out of the kitchen into a long mahogany-paneled hallway. At the opposite end, a hand-carved staircase wound its way to the upper floors. "Dull as ditch water, though." She nodded toward an open door on their right. "Feed hall. Food's lousy," she shrugged, "but there's plenty of it. Something has to be said for that." Violet let go of the suitcases to poke her head inside, but grabbed them again when a door across from them squeaked open. An ancient woman, whose wiry white hair started halfway back on her head, raised a trembling finger to her sunken lips. "Shush! You'll wake the babies." Muriel dropped her voice. "Sorry, Sadie. This here's the new girl, Lily, and her sister Violet." Violet nodded. "And this here's Sadie Hope." "A pleasure," Sadie whispered, stepping out, pulling the door shut behind her. "We just now got the babies to sleep." She motioned the girls farther down the hall, past the dining room and into the parlor. "This is better," she said, dropping onto a rose-colored couch that sagged a good deal in the middle. "Sit down, Lily." She patted the cushion next to her. "Sit, sit," she said to the other two, waving a shaky hand toward twin tapestry-covered chairs directly across from her. Violet let go of the suitcases and perched on the edge of the first seat. Muriel lowered herself into the chair beside her. Sadie placed her quivering palms against Lily's stomach, and Muriel piped up. 6 months along, so she says." "You'll blossom soon enough." Sadie smiled, and her lips disappeared into the space where her teeth once resided. "Plenty of time before I see you." "Sadie delivers the babies around here." Muriel rubbed her belly. "So what do you think?" "Carol Coaches says I'm having a girl, but I don't believe her." Violet stared at Sadie's hands, now folded in her lap and still. "You're a midwife?" Sadie eyed Muriel. "And just how would Carol Coaches know such a thing?" "Says I'm carrying all around. Says that's what happens when you're having a girl. And she should know. Had herself 2 already." Violet tried again. "Does anyone help you?" "Nothing but an old wives' tale," Sadie said. "Only the Almighty himself knows for sure. And if you ask me, Carol Coaches has better things to do with her time than devil you about your baby." She shook her head and mumbled, "2 girls already." "And a boy. Every last one of them farmed out," Muriel explained to the Morgan sisters. Sadie turned to Lily, leaned in, and pushed back her upper lip. "Teeth look good. How are your bowels?" Lily scooted up against the far end of the couch. Sadie seemed not to notice. Had the shakes all my life." She stretched her hands straight out and looked at Violet. "Even as a child." She tipped her trembling palms up and examined them. "Birthed hundreds of babies, though." She paused as if in thought. "Maybe thousands. Funny thing is—" She picked up a tufted pillow and cradled it, turning her eyes back to Violet. "The shaking stops as soon as I take hold of something." She smiled, and her lips disappeared again. The Reverend Mother knocked lightly on the doorframe. "The doctor's asking for you, Sadie." She continued down the hallway. "It's been a pleasure, ladies." Sadie dropped the pillow, stood to leave, and the tremors started up again. "So there is a doctor," Violet said, once the three girls were alone in the parlor. Muriel looked around, then leaned forward. "Only when there's trouble." She ran a finger across her stomach. "He knows how to cut them out." Lily shivered. "Didn't mean to scare you," Muriel said. "He has a purpose, is all. And besides, a healthy girl like you—" She waved her hand. "Piece of cake." Lily teared up. "I want to go home." "Well, you can't." Violet took a breath and tried again. "They'll take good care of you. I'll see to that." "I still don't like it here." "I wouldn't complain too loud," Muriel said, and pointed to the wall closest to the front of the building. "Mother Mary Joseph sleeps in there. Says it's so she's close to the babies, but she can't fool me." She lowered her voice to a whisper. "The woman has elephant ears under that war bonnet. Hears everything." She hooked her thumbs behind her ears and flapped her hands. Lily laughed. "Come on, I'll show you." Muriel smiled and stood up, then led the girls back into the hallway toward the staircase. "Watch." She lifted her foot onto the first step, the boards groaning under her weight. The Reverend Mother's door opened and closed so stealthily that had it not been for Muriel's warning, the sisters would have missed the event entirely. "No need to put locks on the doors," Muriel explained, cupping her ears again. "She'll hear you if you try to give her the slip." Halfway up the steps, Muriel leaned over the banister and pointed down to a set of half-opened French doors at the front of the hallway. "Foyer's through there." "Foyer, ain't that a kick? Never heard of such a word, but that's nuns for you." She paused at the landing, caught her breath, and started up again. "We go through the foyer," she laughed, "to get to the chapel on the left. Hospital's to your right. Everything here's connected. Never have to go out." "Fine by me." Lily pulled one side of her coat over the other and held it closed at her stomach. Muriel continued up to the next landing. "Home sweet home," she said. "The whole second floor is ours. Third floor belongs to the good sisters." She looked up. "And Sadie Hope. Been widowed for 40 years. I suppose if you're going to live like a nun, you may as well live with them. Not that I could ever do it," she chuckled. "Washrooms are at the end of the hall." She pointed toward the back of the building, to the place just over the kitchen. 4 of 'em, 2 on each side. Knock first if you know what's good for you." Muriel opened the door closest to them and pulled the cord on a porcelain ceiling light, one of 4 centered down the length of the room. 18 steel beds, 9 on either side, lined the walls. "Clean, anyways." Violet nodded to the 2 suitcases. "Where do we sleep?" "Up here on the left." Muriel waddled to the end of the room, pulling on cords, lighting the way. 8 and 9. She waved a hand toward 2 unmade beds with linens piled on blue and white-ticked mattresses. "I'm lucky number 7, she said, lowering herself onto the nearest bed. "A pleasure to meet you." She laughed again and lay against her pillow. "How many girls are there?" Lily asked, backing out of the way so Violet could get in to make the beds. "We're full up." Muriel patted the edge of her mattress, inviting Lily to sit. "Everyone's off at chapel just now." Lily half smiled. "Not everyone." Muriel giggled and nodded toward Lily. "I like this one," she said to no one in particular. When Violet finished making the beds, she set the suitcases on top. "You can stash what's yours in the dressers." Muriel motioned toward the small chests of drawers to the left of each bed. "Stow the bags underneath." "I want to be next to Muriel." Lily grabbed hold of the brown metal footboard and pulled herself up farther. Muriel drew up her legs to give the girl more room. "You can't always get your way." Violet ran her hand along the tops of the cowhide suitcases before unbuckling the one closest to her. Matching luggage with forest green lining. They were supposed to have been her wedding present from the widow who had shown them to Violet the day they'd arrived. "I just couldn't wait," the widow had said. "Act surprised when Stanley sees them. We wouldn't want him to think we have secrets." But then the widow had dragged them out again that February night, with Violet's mother and Lily in the parlor. "I thought you could use these on your holiday," she'd said, and smiled as if she'd convinced herself that the sisters really were going to their Aunt Hattie's in Buffalo, instead of an infant asylum in Philadelphia. "It's just that Muriel understands my delicate condition," Lily explained, as Violet lifted her sister's clothes and slid them into the dresser. Lily patted her stomach. "Anyhow, you'll still be next to me, just like home." Not at all like home, Violet thought. At home, Violet slept on the left, Lily on the right. Violet had always slept on that side, even before Lily was born, back when Daisy had been alive to share the bed. Daisy, older by 13 months. Some of the folks in Scranton used to call them Irish twins. Almost 17 years since that tragedy, and Violet's eyes still stung with the memory of it. She reached into her sleeve and discovered Mother Mary Joseph's handkerchief tucked inside. She dabbed her eyes and turned to the girls. "I'll be back." She headed for the door, waving the hanky. Violet made her way down the steps. Since there was no light under Mother Mary Joseph's door, she continued down the hallway to the kitchen. When she found no one there, she decided to step outside for a breath of air. The day had been long and heavy, like every day since the 1st of January. New Year's, a time for luck and second chances. The day Violet had finally understood Lily's predicament. No monthly rags, sick stomach every morning. Her 2 good dresses, her only dresses, pulling at the bosom. Lily had been sulking for the better part of December, but until that morning, Violet had never once thought Lily could be expecting. A sharp wind cut across Violet's face and whipped up a sudden squall of snow, slicing the stars out of the evening sky. Violet whirled round to go inside, tried the handle and found the door locked. Gooseflesh rippled under the thin sleeves of her blouse, prompted more by fear than cold. She cradled her arms, tucked her head, and balled her body up against the fieldstone wall. Violet had been lost in the snow when she was 9 years old, the night she'd helped birth Lily, and ever since she was terrified to be alone in it. She stayed tucked for a long time before she remembered to breathe. The air raced out of her lungs so fast it seemed to push back the wind. The snow stopped falling as quickly as it had begun, and the stars repopulated the inky sky. Violet drew in a breath and listened for the wind to circle back, but heard only the thump of her own heart. She straightened slowly and twisted the knob a second time. The door stayed put inside its frame. Try the main entrance, she thought, whether the nuns like it or not. Just as she rounded the corner, a woman, her face hidden behind a tightly drawn shawl, bolted out of the asylum's double oak doors and down the slate front steps, vanishing into the frozen night. Violet might have thought the woman an apparition if her sobs hadn't pierced the icy silence. Violet scurried through the yard and up the steep steps to a large porch. She looked back to make certain the woman had disappeared before turning the knob and dashing across the threshold. Violet's flesh prickled in the heated air. Her limbs ached from the warmth of the foyer. She stood for a moment, dripping melted snow, silently thanking God for the unlocked door, when what sounded like a baby's whimper interrupted her prayer. Violet looked around and spotted a large white cradle to her right, near the arched entrance to the chapel. A wooden sign above the cradle instructed, "Go and sin no more." The cries started again, full on, so Violet walked over and scooped a swaddled bundle into her arms. A note pinned to a moth-eaten blanket simply read, "Be good to my boy." Violet offered the infant her finger to suck, and noticed his disfigurement. She'd only seen 2 other hair lips in her life.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?